Great, thanks everyone. I'll pass it over to Lisa, who can bring up her slides. And Lisa, feel free to introduce a little bit about your role at Tamarack, and then we can just dive right into Module 6.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm really hopeful that I can be the person who helps weave it together. No pressure, but do jump in with questions at any time, and I will be sharing examples as we go to try to kind of illustrate it. So I hope they're helpful. I'll be sharing examples from both neighborhood work, and there's a lot of really great examples from the poverty work we do too. So I'll be borrowing from those at times. But yeah, just really want to invite you to really ask questions whenever you have them. So I'll share my screen. And before we kind of get into it, just a reminder around our core purpose. We're wanting to, there's a lot of reasons why we evaluate. For the purposes of this conversation today, we're going to focus on communicating impact in order to communicate well, to provide that coherent picture of our progress, in order to engage people, build momentum, inform that piece. You might see a little bit of the others kind of come, there's so, there's intersections between them. Anytime we're reporting on our progress, it makes us ask, okay, what might we do differently? And so you'll see hints of those, but we are really focused on wanting to communicate that impact. So to start us off, why an impact report? And there's lots of different reasons. And so some of these, you might be really connecting with, but I think it's really important to ground in like, what's our goal? What's our purpose of writing this impact report, and holding them, in front of you as you're creating it. So, to mark progress, to celebrate success, to sustain momentum, to increase will, inspire action, raise more funds. You might have some other reasons too. If you do, feel free to pop them in the chat. There's lots of reasons, especially if you're coming at this from a place of being required to do an impact report. Often it can be, we need to get in the mindset shift of this is going to be really helpful, and it has a lot of other benefits in addition to requirements of reporting on our work. When we think about an impact report, the tricky thing is that it's kind of for everybody. It's one report that we're needing to share with lots of different audiences. And, communications 101 is, let's tailor our message for the people that we're speaking to. And so that's a thing, something that's tough, attention that we're going to hold through this, is that we are trying to communicate to a lot of different people who have different understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and would be seeking a different level of detail. And so that can be really tricky. And so some suggestions for, how do we actually create something for everyone is to provide all the context. Make sure that you're not skimming over it, so that people do understand the why, the underlying reasons behind this. Use plain language, and let's simplify. I think you probably come to this place a bit more easily than some of the other groups that we work with, but just really human terms, human language, plain language. Save the detailed analysis for an appendix. For people who want to go there, they will, but you don't need to, for the people who don't want that, you don't want to do anything to stop them progressing through or reading the report. Tell stories and animate the data, and then handhold the reader. Make sure they know where they're at in a report. I think, as I think about reports over the years, and, as we've been working with different groups, the way of doing a report has changed over the years. So when we were able to do infographics, more easily, everything was filled with infographics, which was great because it took these really dense reports and tried to make them more accessible. But I think in that process, we lost a little bit of the narrative, a little bit of the storytelling, a little bit of that human connection. And so we believe that a powerful impact report, does use a narrative type frame and does bring people in and kind of captivate them, inspire them. And so that's something that we're going to try to hold, in this process as well. So I've grouped, the information that I want to share with you. I've grouped in these three buckets of a process. Super simple. We got to collect the information, we have to create the report, and we have to share the report. And so today I'm going to jump into each of these and just share how we see these pieces come together. So as you think about, okay, what information needs to be part of the impact report? We believe that you might have different information depending on where you're at. So are you in a place where you're a little bit more emergent, a little bit more specific in the work that you're doing? An example might be you're working on safety in the park. So it's focused, it's a group that got together and they're doing work. You don't have, a 2-year plan. You're getting together and you're doing the work, and you want to report on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the progress or the impacts that you're having. And so, the information that we think would be helpful for this, and so we've positioned it here as a checklist. We need to set the context. We need to talk about who we are, who's working together, what partners. We need to talk about the event or the data that instigated the work, the why. What happened that made this group form or made it finally top of the list, of the work that's being done within a city, for example. Any relevant environmental factors, what happened halfway through. We have a big one impacting us all of COVID-19, that impacts your work. And so pulling in information about what happened and why, or what impacted it. Sharing your strategy. So strategy, this is an area that looks very different depending on what kind of work you're doing. But really, at its simplest, we could have a goal statement or a strategic learning question, like how might we make it so that the park is a safe place for all members of our community? So like, what is the thing that you're seeking? So after setting the context, let's share the strategy. What is that? And then the last piece is reporting on the progress. And so you might be in a place where you can share the activities you did and some of the outputs. But then if you're in a deeper level, so you have a longer term initiative, you're working, you're using a collective impact model, or you have a several year strategy or more resources. There's a few other pieces of information that you likely have the ability to pull in here. And so you might have, population level stats that instigated this work in addition to an event. You might have a theory of change or a logic model. So communicating that as part of your threshold, your strategy. You might have definitions, or you might have strategic focus areas, domains. You might have research methods and limitations. And so those are some of the pieces in the workbook that accompanies this. Outlined is these are the bits of information that are a must-have. These are the pieces that are a like to have, and these are the pieces that are a love to have. And so it's really about figuring out, what do you have available in front of you? And so it references earlier parts of this series that you can, go to your workbook in this section and pull this piece of information forward. So as we think about collecting the information, you've been hearing about the imperative from Mark through this series. We really think that taking that narrative approach to sharing the story is really powerful. And so as you think specifically, about how you're reporting on your progress, and if you can speak to things that have shifted in the landscape, how awareness and culture has shifted, how systems or programs have been nudged, the various things you've tried, how you've strengthened the capacity of your team. If you can tell that in that narrative form, we've found that to be really, really powerful. So a few examples, and sorry that I didn't change this title. This is from Love My Hood in Kitchener. We have some example reports that we can share with you. So they have just some of those ingredients. You know, they have who we are, who are the partners. They have this graphic, the photo of their team to make it come together. Example from Living St. John on the right. So overall poverty stats, an example with the theory of change there on the left. You might have ways that you're reporting on your activities, your outputs, your outcomes, or impact by priority areas. And then you also might be able to communicate evaluation goals and methodology. And so this is an example from the Calgary Early Learning Centres that are explaining what their goals were in evaluating their work and what their methodology was. And so if you fall on that right side of that table that I shared about, you know, you were taking a bit more of a comprehensive approach, you should be able to explain your methodology in a, you know, in a simple to understand way. And so this is a great example of that. Moving on to create the report. Mark and I brainstormed together about, you know, what makes an effective report in terms of how we're communicating impact. And we named these 7 guidelines. And so I'm going to go through each of them and share some examples about each. So first up, decide how you want the report to feel. This seems super simple, but I think it's important. And I think it's around, you know, as you think about your audience, thinking about the general public, what are they needing? You know, so are you needing to connect it more with the people of the community? You know, if so, maybe let's make sure that our front cover has a picture of the community. Are you wanting to really validate your work? You know, it seems like, oh, they're just working on a bunch of, you know, fun neighborhood stuff, you know, but we want to really emphasize that this is, you know, this is real, this is me, this is, we're making real impacts in the community. Like maybe you want to bring some stats forward. And so just think about, you know, how do we want this to feel? I suggest writing down a couple words and then using that. If you do end up with an impact report that is quite graphic, you can use those words when briefing a designer. Like we want it to feel like this. And often, you know, personality type words are perfect for, you know, to bring that feeling in. So setting the context is number 2. And so it's really, really important to, in as simple terms as you possibly can, set the context. And so, as I mentioned, some poverty examples, some neighborhood examples. But what is the strategy at the glance? Can you, in 1 page, in half a page, explain your work in a really easy way? So what is it that you're doing? What are your goals? What's your mission? What are our principles? You know, what are the priority areas? And so just really encouraging you, you know, I love plans on a page. If there's a way that you can bring all of that information to one place to really set the context. If people want to take your work and share it with somebody else, they have that page to do it. You're equipping them to tell your story as well. More examples here, you know, so you might need to provide a little bit of history of why this work is important, or this group has been working together for a number of years, or this work was formed by this certain table for these reasons, but then it became community wide, you know, and we brought in other partners. And so telling a little bit about that story. I think if you have terms, you know, and resilience is a good one, I would say that the general public might not have an understanding of the full picture and why that might be important. And so if you're wanting to communicate and educate in the process of sharing your report, having having those definitions or that why and that education angle on a page can be really helpful. Also, in setting the context, explain a little bit about the team that's working together. So, you know, if you are working in a collective impact model, you know, that backbone role or how your table's structured or what your priority areas are, what's being reported on in this report. And so you can, in some of the examples, you'll see great examples of that. And then the last example here, and this is from Haldeman and Norfolk, they brought in their population level stats within each of their priority areas. So this priority area is our community is safe. And for each one, that context is provided straight up. They say, why is this important? You know, and really, really articulating why we're focusing on this. And so I found the way that they articulated why that's important. They shared ways that they're measuring their work, and then the story behind the data. So what is going on and that context, why are we seeing this change? And they did it in a really simple way. And so check out that one for some inspiration as well. In terms of where to set the context, up front for sure, but I think it's also important to set the context in each of your kind of priority areas, or if you have several domain areas, doing it within each. I'm calling out this example because if you do have something, you know, an environmental factor like COVID-19, this example from Wood Buffalo, they had some wildfires that really changed the work, and it needed, give yourself permission to explain something that needs to be explained rather than assuming that everybody understands the impacts of that on your work. And so in this example, Wood Buffalo, you know, here's our plan on one page, here's our definition. But then they had this whole page of, you know, we experienced this upturn, we experienced this downturn, we experienced the wildfire. And so just naming the impacts that those have. Number 3 is tell the narrative. So this is like, we want to connect the people with the interventions or with the programs. We want to tell how that has made people feel, the impact that that's had. Explain how each component of the work might contribute. You know, if you're working on a larger scale piece of work, but how does it contribute to the outcomes that you're seeking at if you're seeking community connectedness, how is that doing that? And so this example from the Calgary Early Learning Centers, they have a section on what's it like to visit an early learning center. And so I think that this could be important if one of your audiences are potential funders or influencers, that having that narrative, having that feeling, here's what it's actually like to visit, is really helpful in sharing the impact of that work. And so whenever possible, think about what is that narrative? What is the human connection? How does it weave together with other components, and how does it feel for a person? Number 4 is make human connections. So if you have the ability to collect a story, show a picture of a person, this brings me back to infographics, that they are so wonderful in simplifying information, but we lose the human connection. And so how do we put those things side by side? How do we tell Missy's story? How do we tell Ronnie's story? And really show a face, these are real people. Some people have found that they might not actually have, if you don't have the ability to have, you haven't been able to do interviews, or you don't have an actual quote from someone, you can still make these human connections by telling what that would be like for somebody. So, here's the stats, but here's what it would look like for a single man. Here's what that reality would be. You know, here's what it would look like to be, you know, a full-time wage earner. Here's what your life would be if you had a healthy diet. Here's how much it would cost. And so don't be held back if you don't have the beautiful quote or you know, the story that summarizes the whole impact of your program. You can still make these human connections at that individual level by just sharing what a piece of data means. And then, you know, you'll hear Mark's voice as I say this, right? Like numbers and narrative and numbers. How do these, you know, anytime that you have a piece of data, can you tell a story about it? Can you explain what that would look like for a real person, and just really ground it? Number 5 is make it easy to understand. So again, this is one of the ones that seems so simple, but sometimes I feel like sometimes our work can be a bit complex, but our report doesn't have to be. So the role of the report is to make things easy to understand. And so this example from Kitchener did a really great job in their Love My Hood report. So definitely check out that one as inspiration. So for each of their domain or the focus areas, they have 3. They use the same format of the page, which is really, really helpful so for example, you know, here are 2 of their areas. On the left is the description. On the right is their action areas, and then they have another page. So they're using the same format for each of their focus areas to show people it's a journey as you're reading it. You know, I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to learn the actions. I'm going to see next steps. And it's so simple, but you'd be surprised at how often this is missed. And, you know, I think about some focus areas might be bigger than others. And so if something's for 1 page and then something's for 4 pages, we get lost where we are, you know. And so having the visuals to help tell you where you are in the report is really helpful. So plain language, repeated phrases. So a great example here. So the priority area is great places. So over here, actions to make great places. Repeating, what is the thing that we're talking about? Because if there is a lot of information, it's easy for somebody who's not deeply connected to your work to get lost in it. So just repeat the words, re-emphasize the things that are important. Use visuals, break up text. So, you know, you don't want to be faced with a page of text, so break it up whenever possible. This example, the one thing I wanted to pull out was just the use of a timeline. If a timeline suits your work in helping tell the story, tell the narrative, it's a great graphic, cool tool to help tell a story as a timeline. They also had, you know, any time that somebody can simply describe, here are our strategies, here are our key activities, here are our outcomes, without me reading 2 pages of text, I just say thank you. So just making it easy to understand that way. Number 6, answer the question, so what? So the so what will be different depending on where you're at and what your work focuses on. So some of the prompting so what questions are, you know, when do you expect to see impact? So if you're early on and you're not actually able to report on impact yet, it's what are you hoping for? When do you expect to? You know, when we get crime to this level, when we see this stat drop, when we have somebody at the table from all sectors, when we have open dialogue between these 2 groups. And so, like, when do you expect to see impact is something that can be really helpful to report on. What was the change? Why is that important? What challenges arose and what's changing? And so I can share some examples of some of these pieces. So Iowa, you know, they have, this is a poverty example. So they have some of the thresholds of what they're seeking. And so here's where we win. But if you don't have that, That's fine. So this is an example. This is a plan on a page from Leeds in the UK, and they've been around for a while. But they have, what I love about how they explain their strategy and the so what, they have this area called how we'll know if we've made a difference. And it's basically a list of the indicators that they're tracking and communicating that. Like, here are the things that we are paying attention to. And when we reach, when we reach some of these targets, then we'll know that we've done some good work. So just naming some of the indicators or some of the things that you care about or are tracking. They actually use the language of obsessions. Here are the things we're obsessed with. Like, we need a family to be able to feel comfortable going to the park. Like, here are the things that we're obsessed with. And I love that language. I love how friendly it's as if you're talking to somebody in how the use of that language. Two other examples. So one is around how is your work the same or different? And so helping people understand, here's a traditional lens, here's a resilience lens. And so that before or after, or here's why it's different, the contrast, to help people understand the so what. Another example here around what are we learning? So through this process, here's what we've learned. It doesn't need to be, a beautifully designed thing. It can be text. And so just calling out in each of your priority areas, you may be able to name some challenges. Like, what made this hard? What made you not reach your goals? What made it things slow down? And so just listing the challenges that you faced. And then also sharing what you might be changing or doing differently. So, based on this research, we decided to establish a matching service. So anytime, if you're sharing the outputs, the so what question is next. Okay, why does that matter? We had an increase in this. As a result, we're going to try this. What are you going to do differently? And then the last piece is always share what's next. So you might have this at the macro level, and you might have this for the micro level. So macro is, as we think about this initiative that we're working on, where are we going to next? What's the focus of next year? Or, within a certain priority area, what are our priorities for the next year? So think about always sharing what's next, especially if one of your goals in this report is to build that momentum and to invite people in and to get them excited. Listing what's next is a way to do that. It's so helpful to tie it to a call to action. So how can people get involved? Kitchener says, so how can you get involved, right? Like, name the words. And so here are some ideas to get you going. Here's who to reach out to. Here's why that might be exciting. So those are the 7. Let's cover our last piece, and then I'm excited to have some discussion together. So moving to share the report. So you now have this report. Okay, it's a wonderful report. But then this is where I think there's opportunity to break it up depending on your audience. So thinking about those 3 different audiences groups of public, influencers, and decision makers, think about, okay, what kind of information are they looking for? So, a general public, maybe they're not able or interested in reading a 10-page report. But could you use that that narrative version of your impact to create a 4-minute video with the pictures and some of the stats? How you've already done the work. You've already created the report. How can you chunk it up into bite-sized pieces to share it so that you're able to communicate with different audiences in the way that they need, with the level of information and depth that they need? And so, you know, you've got all the content for a news article or a social media snippet or a poster. If you're able to articulate that your work on one page, you know, could there be a poster version with a call to action at the bottom? Think about the influencers that you might be using your report to reach. And so, you know, if you have several focus areas, should you do a single video in each of those, sharing the progress just of that area, you know, because there might be a focus area that's really relevant to one group. And so going deeper, or presenting a section of it at staff forum, or, you know, who would be interested in that, and then taking that piece of information and sharing it. And then decision makers, really thinking about what level of information do they need? What are they looking for? Do they have time to read a full report, or do you need to pass it in a specific way? We are often asked about what resources are needed, you know, whether it's for budgeting. This is purely an estimate to try to be helpful. So don't hold me accountable to this. I'm just trying to paint a picture for the resources that you might need as you're creating an impact report. So basically, you need someone to pull the content together, to go through the various parts of your workbook that you've already generated, somebody to list out the partners' names, you know, pull the definition that you created a year ago in that work plan, you know, pull the pieces together that likely exist already. And depending on where that information is, like 10 to 40 hours, depending on the work. Somebody to edit, to make it succinct, to tell that story, and someone to design. And so as you think about design, you have lots of options. You could have no design, you could have minimal design, you could have a fully designed report. And so don't stress out about a pressure to have a fully designed report if that's not an option for you. I think telling the story, doing the reporting on progress is step one. And then, you know, maybe next year, it will feel like something that you can do. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, let's talk about, you know, what the options are and what fits best for you. And there's the resource, you know, available to you. And Christine, do you want to speak a little bit more about the workbook and how we're hoping that helps?
Sure. So in the workbook, which it'll be uploaded to the resource library page today after this call, you'll find that there's the 3 sections that Lisa has spoken about. So collecting the information, what you need to do to collect it, creating the report, what are those steps, and then how to share it out. And each of those sections has questions to help you think about who are you going to share out the report with, how, etc. And then at the end of the workbook, there's actually a section where there's prompts for each part of your report. So who are our partners? And there's sections for you to fill in. So once you go through the workbook, you'll actually have your draft of the content that you need to pull together. So that first piece that Lisa talked about. And we're hoping that you might have a chance to look at the workbook before our Q&A conversation on December 10th, because that's a chance for you to come back together as a group and say, okay, I have these 3 pieces of information, but I'm missing these 2 and I have no idea how to collect them. Or I'm really not sure, I've compiled the information, but I don't know how to make it succinct or how to put it into a design that's compelling. So that December 10th call is really the opportunity to say, here's what I'm able to do, and here's really where I'm stuck. And so we really hope these next couple of weeks before that call is your opportunity to sort of reflect on what's realistic for your situation and your scenario. We also will have a call in January with Mark. So there'll be a second opportunity. If you can't make the December 10th call, there'll be a second opportunity in January to meet with Mark and to go through your draft ideas for your report again. but those, all the steps that Lisa outlined today in the presentation are in the workbook. And really it's supposed to just be a step-by-step process where you answer each question for each section and see what's missing, see what you don't have.
So I'd love to open it up to questions or thoughts about how you're feeling about the report. Any questions about what each section might look like or feel like based on your specific situation?
I have one, Lisa. Laverne here. Right at the beginning, when you were talking about creating the report, how do you want the report to feel? You said to come up with a couple of words and maybe it's like a personality. Well, I had trouble with that just yesterday. So can you give me some examples of how can a report feel? This was a newspaper article going in, and I really struggled with that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Laverne. So I often think about, if my report, this might be weird to some, if my report was a person, how would I describe them? So are they knowledgeable? Are they friendly? Are they inviting? Are they inspiring? Like, is this the uncle who tells the best stories at the Christmas party? Or is this the librarian who really validates, knows the context of everything and really validates things? And so like, if you're that kind of person, like conjure up an image of, who's this person? Because I just think that can help kind of ground in what's most important, or what are we leading with? Do we want this? Is it that, I think about the word inviting. So how do you want the reader to feel? So do you want the reader to feel like, oh, I get it. Like I'm smart and I can take action. I can be a part of this. And if so, how are you, what kind of tone is it even using? Is it like, hey neighbor, like come see what we've been up to? Or is it, here is a summary of of everything that the neighborhood collective has achieved over the past year? And just the words, the tone, the images all get at that.
Yeah, it's important. It's like a, yeah, it's like a, yeah, it's about tone.
Yeah. And I just think that tone, that feeling is what encourages people to keep reading. And so it's about like, there's no right answer, but it's about thinking about who your audience is, or just like think about 3 people that you would like to read the report. Often it's hard when we're thinking about a general population, but think about 3 people that you would like to read a report and think about what they would be hoping for.
Great. Good idea. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. That was a fun one.
Lisa, for some of our members, with COVID, budgets are being slashed, and one of the first things to go is like that extra budget for design. And I just wonder for those of us that are sort of doing things in-house ourselves, like a team of 1 or a team of 2, and really don't have that extra resources, can you recommend any free tools such as Canva that could be useful in maybe designing something that's still a little pretty and engaging, but is free or quite cheap?
Yeah, for sure. So Canva is amazing. Hands up if you know and love Canva. Okay, so yes, keep at it for those people. When I'm doing a report, sometimes I do it directly in Canva. Sometimes I just browse the templates to get inspiration when I'm the one who's doing something, and then I just like make a Word document a bit more pretty. So Canva is a tool. Canvas without the S, Canva. And it's a free tool that has a bunch of templates. And so you just click on a template and then like change the text, drag in a picture. It's pretty easy to use, like maybe a 20-minute learning curve, just to have a play. But then, you know, once you get it, it's really simple, and then you can export things as a PDF. So it's a great way of creating graphics, like there would be an infographic template, or just a report in general. So Canva is absolutely wonderful. I also, depending on if like you're a bit of a creative person, I actually just use Word, but get a little bit creative, and I can just share one example to show you some simple things that you can do even within Word. And I'm going to share my screen again. So this is a report I created, and just by putting a picture on the front, and this is just a text box, we're able to make it look really pretty. And so, you know, table of contents, but just using text boxes to call something out. So this page is just an image, and using, you know, right clicking and saying, is it in front of text or behind text? And then using just a shape with text in it can make something look really nice when it's just a Word document. So just an example of how you could do that. Word also has a lot of icons built in, and so just going insert icon, and then you can access you know, a whole library of things that have gotten better over the years. So I just pulled icons from the library within Word. Thanks for the question, Christine. Yeah, Christine, are we able to share the OneDrive of the example impact reports?
Yes, the reports that were in that Google Drive folder are linked in the workbook. So in the workbook, there'll be a link to that drive with all the impact report examples. But some of the ones that Lisa shared in the presentation are just in the slides. So we'll give you the slide deck as well. And some of those, we don't have the full impact report, but there's a screenshot in the slide.
And specifically the Calgary one is there as well. Question about the compliance with the, you know, if it's too pretty. Yeah, really valid to think about what, you know, what does text size need to be, how accessible is this? And so I think there are ways that we can, that, you know, it can be made inviting to read while still being compliant. And I think it's, you know, a lot of times it's around choice in color and making sure there's enough contrast, making sure that everything is in text and not in a graphic for screen readers, those sort of things. And so I do, yeah, I think that's an important layer or a lens to take on your report as well. So thanks for that. Any other questions or thoughts? How are you feeling? Feeling inspired? Feeling daunted?
I think this is a great outline. I just have to figure out what I'm putting in it. So I like how you've laid it all out. There's lots of really good points here. Now I need to go back to the beginning and figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah, and we're really hopeful that that workbook will help you just to be like, all right, list of partners, list of like, what's our strategy? And so just like, yeah, thinking of those buckets in more simple ways, because it's really easy to add content and really hard to edit it down. Because once you kind of put it in the draft, then you want it there. And so, so thinking about what has to be there and what would help tell this story.
So then, Lisa, would you start with just all the text and edit way before you put anything in a format or a, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. Make the look and feel of it. The graphics, the last thing, I would ask the tone question up front, because how you write, it's easier to kind of write. If you want it to be a more casual tone, it's easier to write in that way from the get-go rather than editing afterwards. But for graphics, yeah, leave them till the end.
I also wonder if an hour will be enough for the next meeting. I'm wondering if we can make it a little longer if we're going to go through everybody's kind of draft. I'll leave that to you guys to decide for later and change the invite if that's the case.
Good idea, Deborah. I was also thinking maybe what we could do is match people up. So if Deborah, you have a draft report and Angie has one, we could even just swap and have each person, you know, take a bit of time to look at someone else's and give each other feedback that way. So that way you're not just getting Heather and my and Dan's perspective, but the whole group is giving each other some feedback. I was curious, Lisa, I don't know if you, with that slide on why an impact report, you listed about 6 different reasons. I was curious to know what reasons you all are thinking of creating a report for you. Is it the celebration of successes? Is it the to inspire action and will? Is it to mark progress? Just curious where those different options landed with you all, or is it all of it?
Emily here. Was a brand new project for our agency and for our community. So ours is all about momentum and increasing awareness. And yeah, inspiring action, I think, would be fantastic.
I would say all of the above too, actually. And maybe there was another slide about setting the tone, the idea of just validating that this is important work and not just fun in the community. I loved how you said that, Lisa. I was like, yes. Block parties aren't just about having fun.
Got to pull some theory in there, say this is why, here's the proof points. Yeah.
I would say in London, it's definitely to celebrate success and to mark progress, but more importantly, it is actually an action step right in our strategy. So we have to.
Laverne here. I'm starting to think towards a final report, which basically goes into the government and to our regional district, which celebrating success, I guess, but maybe inspiring their action and more funds. I don't know. But there's so many intermediate steps that need to be done before we get to that. Like that seems like the least of it at this point, because it's way more important to let the residents know what's going on to sustain momentum and inspire action. So yeah, I think there's going to be a bunch of little ones that hopefully will kind of settle into a larger one at the end. Is how I'm going to have to look at it.
Your thoughts, Laverne, made me think of something that I think is important. When you're doing the section on, the invitation, the how can people get involved, if that's something that is important to you, I think there's something about naming specific roles or actions that's really helpful. If you have a blanket, join us. It might sound like you're being, open to however people want to join, but I've found that gets less response than when you name some specific ways that people can join. So by naming 3 options, so like join the neighborhood association, participate in this event, have an idea, submit an application for matching, like whatever it is. But if you're specific with what the ways that people can get involved, you'll have more uptake. If somebody has a specific idea that they can get involved, they'll find you, right? If they're passionate enough, don't worry about excluding people by being specific with how people can get involved. But having that list, I would say is quite important so that people can picture what that would be like. If they're to take that step, they need to be able to know what they're walking into. And so try to articulate those options.
I'm mindful of time. Maybe one more question for Lisa, and then we can continue the conversation on December 10th.
I've got one thing to say about the Haldimand Norfolk example. I was the one who put that one together, and my biggest thing was I didn't want it to be shelved. So I wanted a report that was out and sitting on people's desks that they could refer to. And so, you know, when you're looking at the purpose and the reason, it was not to be shelved.
Yeah. It's I've seen a lot of you know, strategies that, and the question is, how can we make this a living document? How can it be used? And so I've seen people write on the last page, like, this is how we hope that this is used. That, you know, it can be, the principles are adopted by community organizations so that you're validating the voice of lived experience, that the data is used in this way. And so really naming how it can be used so that it isn't just on a shelf. Yeah. I just put a link in the chat. It's a blog post I wrote a while ago, but it's about the ask, like that invitation at the end. And so if that's something that you're thinking about how to do, it might be helpful.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We will get this recording up onto the resource library. It probably won't get up until next week, but we will get the workbook up this week, and the slides, so that you can take the time to review what we discussed today and come with your draft at our next meeting in December. Thanks so much, Lisa.
Thank you. Great to meet you all.